Welcome to Property Quorum. About the usual suspects today, of course, Hamish McClay of Searching Play, Chris Gilson of The Root Home, and of course, Juliet Babulan of Gunner. Welcome to one and all. I'm the gentleman with the purple hat. Today's topic is all about promises, pitfalls, and the pressure on landlords. And as ever, to start us off, Hamish McClay.
Well, good morning, and morning it is, which is a rarity for our podcast because usually it's afternoon. However, morning it might be, but hesitancy there certainly is. We have a strange year this year, but mind we say that probably about every year. This year particularly, though, we have a very, very late autumn budget. In fact, one would think it's probably more like an winter budget, and it'll probably feel like that by the time it arrives too. There's the hesitancy and the sort of timing aren't particularly sort of helpful to anybody within the marketplace. It doesn't give anybody much of a chance to change anything for the tail end of this year. And whilst we've had a number of people thinking, I wonder if this rental idea is a good idea, we've spoken about it to great length because there are certain things which impact very seriously the housing market. One of them is what goes on with rental, because people have to live somewhere. They have to rent it or they have to buy it. And depending on the balance, depends on the way things happen to be going. A lot of people are concerned about the increased cost of owning a property that they're renting out. And the decisions they've been making of late seem to be ones of, well, this is not particularly good if I'm looking at the sort of total cost thing. So from a long-term prospect, there's not many people wanting to move into that, not knowing what the outcome is going to be, particularly in view of the fact we've got another couple of years to go with this present government, that they're going to look like going to just keep on increasing taxation. So the costing, and strangely, people in a certain position are looked at being terribly wealthy. Like, just because you have a house and you rent out a house, you're considered to be somebody that's wealthy, and therefore you need to be paying serious taxes. It's not the case, because it helps and contributes quite significantly to the state of our housing sector today as to how properties are rented out. And it's basically, we're going towards a sort of situation that if you're a very large company, you can afford the overheads. If you're a smaller company, if you only have 2 or 3 properties, or probably not, but a few more than that even, the cost is getting prohibitive. And of course, the imposition on the poor old landlord there is making it a bit difficult. So there is a challenge, and people are actually trying to unload at the same time as not wanting to invest. So we've got a partial stalemate going on.
It seems as ever that we are in a situation, Juliet, where there's a whole series of unknowns, but we are still gradually worming our way towards the German-style rental market, are we not?
I don't know if we're worming our way to the German style. I mean, it just feels really punitive, absolutely punitive. And it's one-sided, lopsided. I saw a tenant yesterday on Instagram with a post saying, we've got so many protections now. And, we...
Right. Well, it seems that the modern data network has failed us once again. Chris, would you step into the breach, please? Do renters now, with renter reform bill, have so many protections that it is, as Juliet says, completely lopsided?
Yeah, they had loads anyway. It was very, very.
Don't have fixed term contracts, etc.
That's all right. Okay, you were saying.
Sorry, it's weird to hear Juliet glitching. They have quite a few They had quite a few rights in the first instance. They have even more now, but it's now tipped so far the other way that while they have all these rights, they're going to have nowhere to live because there's going to be no landlords in the PRS who are operating portfolios. So their level of stock in the short term is going to be dramatically reduced, which is going to have a massive impact on rent spiraling out of control. So they're going to be crying about they have no cost of living, they have no money to live, and clinics and other cost of living crisis. But it's not. It's a government-inflicted crisis by the buffoons that are operating the levers at this point in time. So yeah, I feel for the people who are in that position, and there are different avenues for different landlords. I saw that. I mean, the title of this discussion is in relation to, or the thread of this discussion is in relation to rent to rent. And there are different opportunities for landlords in that particular sector. However, the incoming party who's looking to do the renting and make the margin in between, the subletting effectively, with the owner landlord being the superior landlord, it normally requires an adjustment to the property setup. So, for example, it could be a landlord who's operating a single let property, and then the rent to renter, the investor could be looking to do an Airbnb, and that's how they make their margin in between. Because obviously there's quite a spread between a single let property and turning it into a rent to rent a Airbnb property. However, it's still taking stock out of the PRS potentially. So there's lots of downsides to where we're at the moment, and not many upsides, unfortunately.
So do you perceive that there's going to be, I mean, there's been, ever since you and I encountered each other all that time ago, there's been a continuous drip feed of landlords disappearing off the market anyway, as they give up the ghost. Now, originally it was just the so-called accidental landlords, people who, moved in with their partner, had a home extra, and so on. Now it's the people with small portfolios. Do you think there's going to be a mass exodus come the rental reform bill actual ratification?
I'm seeing it happening already. These landlords, they've been operating their portfolios for the last 40 years or so. That it's been mostly a side job for them up to a tipping point. They've worked a working life, and any additional money they've had, they've thought, well, pensions are a Ponzi scheme. Why would I put my money into that? I'm going to put it into bricks and mortar. So they did, right. Quite rightly so. And that's accrued over time. They've acquired a couple of properties, which has become a portfolio. So most landlords are in that 1 to 3 bracket, with obviously some having a few more. But even 3 properties, that can be a bit of a headache to operate. So there's all sorts of challenges in dealing with a portfolio as it starts to grow. But there is also a tipping point where it starts to generate enough income, and obviously people hit retirement and they're like, well, I'm going to keep going, and I'll keep it ticking over because it is income coming in, so I don't necessarily need to sell it at this point in time. I'm contributing to the economy and providing housing for people who want housing. They probably haven't raised their rent prices in the last decade or more. So there's almost a negative impact on the tenants that live there, because in the event that they have to go and find additional property or replacement property, they're going to be exposed to the wild rate increases that have happened over the last decade or more. But yeah, and these landlords, they've been put in a position now where they've just been bashed and bashed and bashed over the head all the time, and they just got completely sick of it. So, and like I say, it's very understandable, and they're just in a position where they're like, well, what's in it for me anymore? Why should I bother? And they're like, they're right. There's nothing really in it for them. So they're like, well, forget it. I'll cash out. And that's where we're up to right now.
It's the tipping point. I mean, it used to be about 3 or 4 properties, and then you'd have to start building your own mini infrastructure to manage the things.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to build in extra layers of protection and security and bring on specialist services. What is it now? You have to have about 10 properties plus all the processes around it to make it worthwhile, or do you know what the number is?
It depends. It depends on strategy. It depends on how much net you're getting to keep after all your operating costs. But yeah, it's a few. It is a few at the very least. And And like I say, this situation is being compounded by the government, that it seems to be going down cul-de-sacs and chasing the tiniest little imposition and creating all these massive rules and regulations around it, when the elephant in the room is the one that they've actually addressed and then turned their back on it and ignored. They need to deliver the houses. Deliver the houses, all these other crises you won't have. That's it. It's solved.
Hamish, we were promised, again, it feels a bit like Groundhog Day, doesn't it? Every time there's a new government, they promise a certain number of houses to be delivered within a certain period. And these houses are all phantom houses, because to my mind, they haven't really materialized.
Well, we had, I think more so, this particular sort of generation of government, if you like, if we wish to sort of call it that, they came in with their manifesto was based solely, they didn't seem to be saying very much else other than the fact that they were going to be looking after the man in the street, the poor old man in the street, sort of he's sleeping there now, because the situation that they did intend doing something about is the thing which has fallen away most heavily. In fact, that's probably not quite right, because just about everything has fallen away. The reality, I mean, when we look at it, and there was some investigations sort of carried out, and I think the most recent figures I was looking over it was something like August. It was suggesting in August that year on year, the rents had gone up by 20% in the last 12 months. Now, if you're doing rent to rent, of course, somebody's, if you like, everybody's costs are going up. The operating costs are going up. Material costs are actually sort of going up. The advertising costs are sort of going up. So basically, it doesn't matter who's renting this particular property, whether it's the prime owner or whether it's somebody else renting on their behalf. We've got a serious situation with all of those costs. So even that differential, if you want to maintain the differential, the rental does actually sort of have to go up. But I think it's not just that so much, because that in itself is a serious challenge to many people trying to find accommodation, the actual cost of that accommodation now. But it's down to the availability. And of course, what we do know, the less there is available, the greater demand, if you like, within the market there for people to find places, it pushes those prices up. And of course, with all of the other costs going up, including the taxation, I mean, it was a little unfortunate that Juliet wasn't able to actually continue with the full sort of conversation. She was saying punitive. It seems the whole of society, the biggest drive at the moment is to put the cost up for that man in the street, the everyday man, the man that goes out to work, the man that maybe, if he's lucky, has 2 or 3 properties. But can he afford to actually sort of keep them? But it's basically everything is going up, cost on cost on cost on cost. The cost of living is seriously expensive. And a lot of this isn't taken into consideration when we look at the general sort of cost of living and the way it's going. So we've got a serious, and the thing is, one needs to look at, if one has cash, is it property that we need to invest in? Is it a good way of actually doing it? A consortium might be a way of doing it because you safeguard interest, but as an individual with those on costs, this is a scenario. Now, we don't know what the seriousness was of this particular sort of government minister who evicted four people, I believe it was. It doesn't matter whether it's 3 or 4 out of properties that she had in London because she wanted to sell the property. Now, if you're actually trying to sell property in London, it is serious cost anyway, right. because of the rental there. There's every chance it can fall through. But the legalities now that they put in, and again, it is punitive. You're told, you cannot, if you want to put it on the market, you've got to wait 12 months. Now, that particular owner has now got 12 months of no income. They've still got the outgoings. They've still got to pay the council tax. There's so much they've got to actually sort of do. It really is making it very, very difficult for a large number of people in the rental market and the rent-to-rent market as well. They need to be very, very cagey about what they're doing. And that's why not a lot of people want to change. And it does seem the biggest amount of movement is moving out of the situation rather than creating sort of more homes. And when we look at because the number of homes aren't being keeping up with the quantity that was required for a number of reasons, we're going to get nowhere near that 1.5 million. If we actually sort of look at what we've done sort of so far. And of course, it's not happening. We are not getting the investment in new properties either.
Right.
So we've got that double whammy coming from both ends.
Good Lord. It Chris, it just seems to me, and I've said this before, and at the expense of repeating myself, that there's no interest in finding a middle path. It's all about extremism. It's either all the renters' way or all the landlords' way, and it seems to me more fiscally responsible to find somewhere that both can win, and that way that the marketplace doesn't become as jaundiced as it's about to.
Yeah, I mean, to an outsider looking in, they look like hapless idiots running around. It's wild.
I shouldn't laugh, really, because it's actually quite depressing.
It is, yeah. I remember studying politics back in my teens, and it's not changed. So you have to think, well, why? Why has it not changed? There've been generations and generations since I was studying that, but it seems to have got worse and then deteriorated, not better. So the cynic in me goes to perhaps this is orchestrated. Perhaps something else is pulling the strings. Perhaps this is the way the system's meant to be, and it's running exactly as it's designed. But who knows? I just find it quite disappointing and frustrating that we seem to be going on this very continual downward slide. When we, the layman, we all have the answers, and we're all kind of singing the same hymn sheet, and it just seems strikingly obvious to us all.
Well, in a world where the upper or the lower house, which is often referred to as the commoners, are supposed to represent the wants, needs, and thoughts of the common people, there seems to have become a divide. I mean, I don't know whether or not I'm the only person in thinking this, but they've become, in some way, superior to us, and therefore don't need to look at the wants and needs of the very people that they're supposed to represent. I mean, forgive me, Guy Fawkes, come back, all is forgiven. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Hamish, would you care to take us home, please?
Well, I think really what we can do, look briefly at the situation. We spoke about the two houses there. There was an opportunity earlier this week for with the serious discussions going on. One of our sort of team members, actually, sort of Steve, was a great one for actually helping to push this one forward with the Earl of Lytton, and there was a Baroness. There's so many people involved in this particular thing. Yet when we looked at it, the outcome of the vote, it wasn't to look as to are we moving forward, and this does emphasise what's happening at the moment. And Chris really hit the number there, because what's actually happening, people are doing because they're politicians and because they choose to do it. When you look at what was going on in the House of Lords, there was a massive vote by Labour Party against improving the situation for residents caught in a very difficult situation. This was a political vote. Now, surely in the House of Lords, one would have assumed that they would have gained an element of sort of, if you like, viewing what was going on around them. They didn't have the same imposition. They didn't have the same pressure that the member of the Labour Party does have in the sort of House of Commons. But you see exactly the same thing in the House of Commons. How on earth can all of the Labour Party members feel that it is better not to improve the lot of people within? And I think, unfortunately, whilst we see a government which is trained on following their leader, well, I could go on for a very long time, actually, with various examples of where we see this sort of happening in society. There's no longer do we have politics or the politicians looking after the individuals, the residents, the people, the common people, if you like, because it's down to a political. We have to vote this way because we've been told to vote this way, not because it's an intelligent thing to do, but because it's a political thing to do. And if we say anything different, we might help people, I guess. And we're not here to help people. We're here to follow the political rule.
Well, I hesitate to agree with you because that's a bit of a bleak statement there. But I think you're probably right, if not in part, or not in whole, in part. Certainly, the whip has been there in all parties for a long time, for hundreds of years. But the trouble is now you've got people blindly following stuff from the perspective from my perspective of self-preservation, and rather than what is the good for the common people. And working for the common people is by definition what they're supposed to do. So it feels like there's perhaps as a party, and maybe this is across the board, because it seems to be, forgive me for nailing my colours to the sail, but I think the Green Party are the only ones who seem to be speaking for anyone else other than political gains at the moment. I never thought I'd say that. I mean, maybe to their demise, I don't know, but certainly I don't know of any other political party at the moment that seems to be representing the will of the people. And I implore anyone listening, please remember what you got into this for. From every politician I've ever encountered, and I've encountered quite a few, their original motivation for getting involved in politics was never about making money or towing party lines. It was about helping the common man and woman. That was their original motivation. And I implore people, try and remember that. And also try and remember your promises pre-election to try and build more bloody houses. Because that is the tipping point. That is shoving us, because so few houses have been built. We're now in this ridiculous downward spiral. Anyway, I'll stop ranting. Thank you so much, Chris Gilson from Root Home, for having graced us with your presence and spoken a lot of sense. And Hamish McClay, for your bleak perspective, but I suspect it's on the bloody button. And to all of you out there, thanks for sticking with us. We've had some technical issues to do with the interconnectivity of the modern data network, but it's amazing. I used to work in such a field, and it amazes me it hangs together at all. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Until next week, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and try and look after your mental health. Until then, bye-bye.